The first time I realized I was being inspected, it was over a Walmart receipt I'd folded into a neat square and tucked under my water glass. It had a red rollback sticker on it, and when I saw his eyes drop to it, then back to my face, I stayed quiet and smiled like nothing inside me had just cracked. He didn't ask my name first. He asked what I did, like a person was a product label. My name is Waverly Quinn. I'm 33 years old, and I run compliance and operations for a medical tech company in San Francisco. On paper, that's boring. In real life, it means I've spent years learning how powerful people hide their mess behind polite language, and how you can end them without ever raising your voice. That night, I was in Chicago, in a restored Gold Coast brownstone that smelled like lemon polish and expensive flowers. It was the kind of place where even the air felt trained. I was there because Griffin Hayes asked me to come. Griffin was warm in a way money usually sanded off. He held doors, remembered coffee orders, texted back in full sentences. When we first started dating, he told me he wanted something real, not another social circuit relationship that existed for photos. I believed him because when he looked at me, his attention didn't feel like a spotlight. It felt like shelter. But I'd never met his father. His father, Weston Hayes, owned Hayes Capital, a private equity firm that bought struggling companies and streamlined them until they became profitable again. That was the polite version. The real version was layoffs, asset flips, and boardroom pressure that left founders hollowed out. We were there for a fundraiser dinner, supposedly. A long table, white candles, crystal glasses that clicked like tiny bells whenever someone laughed. 20 guests, all dressed in soft fabrics and hard confidence. A senator, 2 hospital board members, a woman who kept calling the waiter sweetie without ever looking at him. I wore a simple black dress, off the rack, fitted and clean, not flashy. I'd learned the hard way that flash invites questions. Quiet makes people underestimate you. Griffin squeezed my hand under the table, his thumb rubbing a small circle into my skin like a promise. Weston Hayes sat at the head, perfectly centered, as if the room had been built around his ego. He had silver hair that looked styled even in motion, and a voice that never rose because it never needed to. Power doesn't shout, it assumes. I'd barely taken a sip of Pinot when it happened. Weston's gaze flicked to my wrist, where a faint scar cut across the inside like a pale thread. I'd gotten it years ago, moving a heavy equipment case too fast, too careless. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine. He smiled without warmth. "Griffin," he said slowly, like he was testing a word. "You didn't mention she had history." The table went still. The kind of still where you can hear someone's fork scrape plate in the far corner. Griffin cleared his throat. "Dad, this is Waverly." Weston didn't look at my face. He looked at my hands, then my dress. Then, like he was bored, he glanced toward the folded receipt under my water glass. His mouth tightened in a thin line that pretended to be a smile. "Let's be honest," he said, and the way he said honest felt like a knife being polished. "We all admire a little charity, son, but you don't confuse your future by bringing it to the table." I felt my chest go tight, like a band had snapped around my ribs. My fingers curled beneath the linen. I didn't move. I didn't blink too fast. I didn't give him a reaction to feed on. Someone gave a soft laugh, the nervous kind, as if this were a joke they were required to enjoy. Griffin's face drained of color. "Dad, stop." Weston swirled his wine, still not looking at me directly. "Stop what? Stating the obvious. She's sweet, I'm sure. Hardworking, persistent. But there are places where effort isn't the entry fee. There are rooms where names matter. And there are rooms where people like her are presentable but not permanent." Heat crawled up my neck. I tasted metal in my mouth. I kept my expression neutral because the moment you show pain to someone like Weston Hayes, he counts it as a win. Across the table, a woman in pearls tilted her head with mild interest, like she was watching a documentary. A man with oil-slick hair took a slow sip and pretended not to notice the cruelty happening in plain sight. Griffin's hand tightened around mine. "Waverly is not." Weston finally looked at me then. His eyes were pale and calm, like frozen water. "She knows," he said casually. "Look at her. She's sitting there pretending she belongs, but she can feel it. The way everyone's measuring her. It's unkind, really, to let her play dress-up in a room where the silverware costs more than her upbringing." My ears rang. My stomach dropped. I wanted to stand. I wanted to say my job title, my achievements, my degrees, my patents, the years I'd spent building a life nobody handed me. But I didn't. Because I had learned something about men like Weston Hayes. They don't respect explanation. They respect consequences. So I lifted my glass, took a small sip, and let my silence sit between us like a mirror. Weston's smile widened, satisfied, as if my quiet proved his point. Griffin whispered hoarse, "I'm so sorry." I turned my head slightly toward him, just enough that only he could see my eyes. "It's okay," I said softly. It wasn't okay, but he didn't need to know that yet. The dinner continued like a play where everyone pretended the script wasn't rotten. Conversation shifted to hospital expansions, real estate, a new wing named after someone's dead grandfather. Weston told a story about saving a company by cutting half its staff, and the table rewarded him with laughter like he'd performed magic instead of violence. I listened, I watched, I filed things away. Because here was the first twist that nobody at that table knew. I wasn't in Chicago for a fundraiser. I was in Chicago because Hayes Capital had been trying for months to acquire a company called Larkridge Medical Systems, a mid-sized medical tech firm with a breakthrough device that could detect sepsis faster than any hospital protocol currently on the market. Larkridge had the tech. Hayes Capital had the money. And Hayes Capital was bleeding reputationally after a recent scandal, so they needed a win that looked noble. Larkridge was that win. And Larkridge belonged to me. Not publicly, not in a way you could Google. I'd built Larkridge quietly, then set it up under a holding structure that shielded ownership for exactly this reason. I had a proxy CEO, a board, layers of legal protection. I didn't like headlines. Headlines brought people who wanted to take, not build. And I'd spent too many years surviving to start handing strangers maps to my life. Weston Hayes had been negotiating with my team for weeks, thinking he was squeezing a faceless founder somewhere. He pushed deadlines. He'd pushed valuation. He demanded control clauses that would let him strip the company down and flip it later. I'd said yes to the meetings, yes to the documents, yes to the pace. And I'd stayed anonymous on purpose. Because I wanted to see him up close. I wanted to know if the arrogance I'd heard about was real or exaggerated. Now I knew. A server placed dessert down in front of me, a delicate lemon tart. Weston leaned back in his chair as if he'd conquered something. "You're quiet," he said to me like he was amused. "That's good. Quiet women don't embarrass men who aim higher." Griffin's jaw flexed. "Dad." I reached for my fork, calm. "It's a lovely tart," I said, as if my world hadn't shifted. Weston's eyes narrowed slightly, like my composure annoyed him. Then he did something subtle. He nodded toward a man seated 2 chairs down, a lawyer type with a tight smile. The lawyer leaned in and said, conversationally, "Waverly, what do you do again?" The question wasn't curiosity. It was a trap. The room waited, hungry. I could have said compliance, operations, medical tech. But Weston Hayes had already decided who I was. If I tried to climb out of his box with words, he'd push me back in with laughter. So I gave them what they expected, with a small adjustment that they wouldn't catch yet. "I handle systems," I said. "I make sure the right people have access and the wrong people don't." The lawyer chuckled politely, confused. Weston smiled. A gatekeeper, how fitting. I nodded, quiet again, and continued eating. Griffin walked me out later, past the marble foyer, past framed photos of his family on yachts and ski trips, all of them smiling like nothing had ever cost them pain. Outside, the wind off Lake Michigan was sharp and clean. Griffin looked like he'd been holding his breath for 3 hours. "I didn't think he would do that," he said, voice shaking. "I swear to you." "I know," I said. But the truth was, I wasn't sure I did know. Because here was the second twist. When Weston spoke to me like I was temporary, Griffin didn't stop him immediately. He tried. He hesitated. He froze for just long enough that I felt myself standing alone in the room. 10 seconds doesn't sound like much until you're being humiliated and counting every heartbeat. Griffin ran a hand through his hair. He's under stress. The hospital partnership, the investors, everything. He's been awful lately. I watched Griffin's face, searching for the softness I loved. It was there, but buried under something else. Fear. Not fear for me, fear of him. You shouldn't have brought me, I said gently. His eyes widened. No, I wanted you here. I wanted them to meet you properly. Properly, I repeated, and the word tasted strange. He stepped closer. Please don't let him win. Don't let him poison this. I met his gaze. I won't. And I meant it. But not in the way Griffin thought. That night back at my hotel, I didn't cry. I didn't throw things. I didn't call my friends to vent. I sat at the small desk, opened my laptop, and read the latest draft of Hayes Capital's acquisition terms. Clause after clause, control provisions, board replacement rights, performance-based layoffs disguised as efficiency. Weston wasn't just cruel at dinner. He was cruel by design. My phone buzzed, a message from Griffin. I'm sorry, I love you, please talk to me. I stared at it for a long moment, then set the phone face down. Because my assistant, Arden, called next. Her voice was tight. Waverly, we just got an email from Hayes Capital's counsel. They want to move the signing, Monday morning at 9. They're saying the board needs it locked before the market opens. My fingers went still on the keyboard. Monday. That was fast, too fast. That's aggressive, I said. It gets worse, Arden added. They also asked for a last-minute addendum. They want immediate access to Larkridge's internal clinical trial data before the signing. Full data set. Names redacted, but still, it's not standard. My stomach turned cold. Weston wasn't just trying to buy my company. He was trying to steal what he could before the ink dried, in case the deal collapsed. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window at the city lights. Cars moved below like a stream of silent decisions. I thought about the way Weston had glanced at my receipt, like he'd already written my value in his head. I thought about the way the table had stayed quiet, because cruelty is easier when everyone agrees to pretend it isn't happening. And I thought about the scar on my wrist, the one he judged without knowing the story behind it. Arden waited on the line. What do you want to do? I let the silence stretch just long enough to feel my heartbeat settle. Then I spoke, calm and clear. Tell them yes, I said. Tell them Monday at 9 works. Arden exhaled. Okay, and the data access. Yes, I said again, and my voice stayed even. Give them exactly what they asked for. Arden paused. Waverly, are you sure? I looked down at my laptop screen, at the draft agreement, at the parts Weston assumed I wouldn't understand. My fingers hovered over the trackpad like a surgeon about to cut. I'm sure, I said softly, but we're going to give it to them the right way. Another pause. The right way how? Arden asked. I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it exactly what Weston's lawyer had requested. Clinical trial data, full access. Then I created another folder beneath it, one Arden didn't know existed. Audit trail. Because if Weston Hayes wants access, I said, he's going to sign his name to every door he tries to open. Quick real-life pause. I read the comments when I'm worn out, and seeing your location reminds me I'm not telling these stories into an empty room. Like, subscribe and drop your city, state, or country. Now, let me take you back. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, Griffin showed up at my hotel with coffee and an apology that looked sincere. He told me he'd fought with his father after I left. He told me he was embarrassed. He told me he wanted to prove he wasn't like him. I listened, nodding, letting him talk, because sometimes people reveal themselves best when you don't interrupt. Then Griffin said something that made my skin go tight. He's obsessed with this deal, he admitted. He keeps saying the founder is weak, that they'll fold if he pressures them. He's been bragging about how he's going to take control and reshape the company. My throat went dry. He said that. Griffin nodded. He thinks the founder is some anxious scientist who needs money. He thinks they'll take anything. I held my coffee cup with both hands to keep my fingers from trembling. Did he mention clinical data? I asked casually. Griffin blinked. Yeah, he said he wants access early. He said it's just due diligence, but he smiled when he said it, like it was a trophy. I felt something sharp and clean slice through my chest. Because now I understood. Weston hadn't just insulted me for sport. He'd done it because he thought people like me were predictable, weak, easy to corner. And I was about to let him corner me. On purpose. I smiled at Griffin and said, "Your dad has a talent for getting what he wants." Griffin's face softened with relief, like he thought I was forgiving. I know, but I want to be different. I want to build something with you. I took a slow sip of coffee and let the warmth coat my tongue. Okay, I said. Griffin leaned in hopeful. Okay. Okay, I repeated, and my voice was gentle enough to sound like love. But inside, I was already watching Monday morning unfold like a scene I'd scripted. Because the third twist was the one Weston Hayes would never see coming until it was too late. The data folder we were giving him was real. But the access path was a trap. Every file would watermark silently, every click would log, every download would timestamp, every forward would record the destination. We weren't going to accuse Weston of theft. We were going to let him steal. And then we were going to show the truth to the right people. On Sunday night, Arden sent me a message. Audit trail is live. If they touch anything, we'll know. I stared at the words for a long time, then typed back one word. Good. Then I opened my email and drafted a second message, one I didn't send yet. It was addressed to the Hayes Capital board chair, a man named Parker Cooper who cared about reputation more than loyalty. Subject line, confidential, pre-signing risk. I didn't attach anything. I didn't threaten anything. I didn't insult anyone. I simply prepared the quiet knife. And I waited for Weston Hayes to reach for the data like he was entitled to it. Monday morning arrived like a verdict. By 6:12 a.m., I was already dressed, hair smooth, makeup minimal, the kind that made me look rested even when I was. My hotel room smelled like stale coffee and the citrus cleaner housekeeping used on the nightstand. I stood at the window and watched Chicago wake up, headlights sliding down Lake Shore Drive like glowing insects. I checked my phone once. No new messages from Griffin. That silence sat heavy because it felt intentional now, like he was choosing safety over discomfort. I told myself not to punish him for being human, but I also told myself not to confuse tenderness with trust. Arden texted at 6:30. They accessed the folder at 6:29. User credentials belong to Weston. My stomach dropped in a slow, controlled way. I exhaled through my nose and stared at the screen until the words stopped looking like words and started looking like proof. Of course it was him. He could have waited until the meeting. He could have followed process. He could have respected the boundary he claimed was normal due diligence. But men like Weston didn't wait. They took. They called it strategy. I typed back, "Do not intervene. Let it happen." Arden responded with a single line. "Audit capture is clean. Full trail." I set my phone down and sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight, like my body wanted to panic, and my mind refused to give it permission. I thought about his face at that dinner, the calm cruelty, the way he'd glanced at my receipt like it was a stain that could spread if allowed too close to him. I had been quiet at the table. He'd mistaken silence for submission. Now he was walking into a room that would prove him wrong, and he didn't even know it. At 7:10 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Arden. He downloaded 3 files. Then he forwarded them to an external email. My throat went dry. What email? I said out loud, even though I was alone. Arden typed it out a second later. A personal Gmail account. The name on it looks like a contractor. My mind moved fast, connecting threads. Weston was either planning to leak, shop, or replicate the dataset to pressure us. Or worse, he was handing it to someone who could monetize it before the acquisition even closed. That wasn't just dirty business. That was dangerous. Clinical data, even redacted, still carried risk. And risk was the kind of thing boards hated when it wasn't theirs to control. My phone rang. Griffin. I stared at his name for a long moment. My thumb hovered, then I answered. Hey, I said, voice even. He sounded breathless. Waverly, where are you? In my hotel, I said. Why? My dad is losing it. He's at the office early and he's screaming at everyone. He says the founder is playing games. He says someone is trying to make him look stupid. A small, cold part of me almost smiled. Weston could feel the edges of something tightening around him, and it was making him reckless. I'm sorry you're dealing with that, I said. Griffin swallowed. Are you coming to the signing? Yes, I said. I'll be there. There was a pause. Then quietly he said, he shouldn't have spoken to you like that. My grip tightened on the phone. No, I agreed. He shouldn't have. He wants me in the room today, Griffin added. For optics, he keeps saying it's a family victory. I pictured Griffin in a glass building, wearing a suit like armor, trying to be both son and man at the same time. You don't have to do anything for optics, I said. I know, he whispered, like he didn't believe it, but I don't know how to stop him. I closed my eyes. My voice stayed soft. Sometimes you don't stop someone. Sometimes you let them reveal themselves. What do you mean? He asked. Nothing, I said. Just stay calm. Don't defend what you can't fix. He exhaled. I hate this. I know, I said again, and this time it meant more than he understood. When I ended the call, my phone buzzed almost immediately with a new message. Unknown number. You think you're clever. Tell your people we want full access or we walk. I stared at the message until the anger became something quieter and sharper. The timing told me everything. Weston didn't know who I was, but he knew the other side of the table was resisting. He thought intimidation would work. He still thought he was the predator. I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I didn't correct him. Instead, I opened my laptop and sent Arden a single instruction. Send the draft email to Parker. Attach the audit excerpt, only the part that shows external forwarding. Arden replied quickly. Understood, sending now. My pulse stayed steady, but my skin felt cold, like my body knew a storm was about to break. At 8:05 a.m., I left the hotel. The lobby was quiet and smelled like fresh pastries and money. I walked past a couple in matching coats, the kind of couple who smiled without looking at each other. Outside, the air was sharp enough to sting my lungs. The car service Arden booked waited at the curb. Black sedan, tinted windows. The driver didn't speak unless spoken to. I slid into the back seat and watched the city pass by like a film I had no interest in. I didn't look at my reflection. I didn't rehearse speeches. I didn't plan a dramatic reveal. Silent revenge isn't theatrical. It's administrative. At 8:43 a.m., we pulled up to Hayes Capital's building. Glass and steel, security in tailored suits. A lobby designed to make people feel small before they ever reach the elevators. Arden met me near reception. She was younger than me by a few years, with a calm face that could go blank in seconds. She carried a slim folder under her arm and a coffee in her other hand. You look fine, she said softly, as if she could read the pressure on my skin. I am fine, I said. Her eyes flicked to the security desk. Weston is already upstairs. Parker is in a closed meeting with legal. Your email triggered an emergency compliance review. I nodded once. Good. Arden hesitated. There's something else. What? I asked. He didn't just forward the files, she said. He also tried to alter the folder permissions afterward. He wanted to hide the access logs. It failed, but the attempt is recorded. The corners of my mouth tightened. That was the part that changed everything. Downloading was one thing, trying to cover it up was intent. "Perfect," I said, and Arden stared at me like she wasn't sure whether to be impressed or afraid. We rode the elevator up. The walls were mirrored, and I watched my face without really seeing it. Calm, composed, the kind of face Weston Hayes would assume belonged to someone he could dismiss. When the doors opened, the floor was quiet, carpeted, warm. People moved like they were trained to never look rushed, but their eyes were restless today. Something had already spread through the office like smoke. A receptionist looked up. "Can I help you?" Arden stepped forward. "Waverly Quinn, 9 o'clock. The receptionist blinked. "I'm sorry, I don't see that name on the schedule." Arden smiled politely. "Check again, it's under Larkridge." The receptionist's fingers moved faster. Her face changed. "Oh," she said, and her voice dropped slightly. "Yes, they're expecting you." Arden's gaze flicked to mine. That small reaction mattered. My name meant something here. Not socially, not at dinner tables, but in documents, in contracts, in liabilities. We walked down the corridor toward the conference rooms. As we passed a glass wall, I saw Griffin. He was standing with two men in suits, shoulders tense, jaw tight. He turned and caught sight of me. His eyes widened, not with joy, but with a nervous relief that looked like he wanted me to save him from his father. He started to step toward me, but one of the men said something, and Griffin stopped. I kept walking. Not because I didn't care. Because my silence was part of the boundary he needed to learn. Arden guided me into a smaller room near the main conference suite. The air smelled like printer toner and cedar. A carafe of water sat on a tray like it was ceremonial. "Parker wants to see you privately before the signing," Arden said. "Of course he does," I replied. We waited, 2 minutes, then 5. Through the frosted glass, I could hear raised voices. Weston's voice was low but sharp, the kind of sharp that cut without effort. Another voice, older and flatter, pushed back. That would be Parker. At 9:06, the door opened and Parker Cooper stepped in. He was in his 50s, tall, with a polished, careful look. His face had the strained calm of a man who had spent decades managing other men's egos. He held a tablet in his hand. "Ms. Quinn," he said, and his tone was polite, but his eyes were hard. "Thank you for coming on short notice." "I didn't schedule the short notice," I said, "but I'm here." He studied me for a beat, like he was reconciling two different images. The dinner table girl his people likely assumed I was, and the name on the legal documents that now threatened their entire deal. "I received an email from your team," Parker said. "It alleges misconduct." "It doesn't allege," I replied. "It records." Parker's lips pressed into a line. "Your assistant included an audit excerpt showing our managing partner accessed confidential materials early, forwarded them externally, then attempted to obscure access logs." "Yes," I said. Parker's voice stayed measured. "If that is accurate, it creates exposure, regulatory exposure, reputation exposure, lawsuit exposure, and it jeopardizes the entire acquisition." I tilted my head slightly. "Correct." Parker inhaled, then said the part he didn't want to say. "Was that intentional, the trap?" I held his gaze. "I created a secure access path with audit logging because your team requested early access. I did not force Mr. Hayes to misuse it." Parker's jaw tightened. He didn't like that the truth was clean. Clean truth is harder to bury. "Weston is saying the access was necessary," Parker said. "He's claiming your team is being difficult." "I am not difficult," I said calmly. "I am compliant, there is a difference." Parker's eyes flicked toward Arden, then back to me. "What do you want?" I set my hands on the table, palms down, steady. "I want the deal paused, immediately." Parker blinked, paused. "Yes," I said, "and I want your board to conduct a full internal review of Mr. Hayes's conduct before we continue." Parker's voice sharpened. "He's the firm." "No," I corrected. "He's a liability." The room fell quiet. I could hear my own breathing. I could hear Arden's pen tapping once against her folder, then stopping. Parker leaned forward slightly, and his tone turned strategic. "If we remove Weston from the negotiation, will you sign today?" I looked at him. "That depends." "On what?" he asked. "On whether your firm understands the difference between buying a company and controlling a person," I said, "and on whether your culture is willing to change. Or just willing to hide." Parker's eyes narrowed. He was calculating. He didn't care about morality. He cared about survival. That was fine. Survival could be leveraged too. Before he could respond, the door opened again. Weston Hayes walked in without knocking. His face was flushed. His tie was loosened. His eyes were bright with anger that had nowhere to land yet. He stopped when he saw me, and for a fraction of a second, confusion crossed his expression. Then contempt slid into place like armor. "You," he said, as if my existence in his office was offensive. "What are you doing here?" Parker's voice was cold. "Weston, not now." Weston ignored him. His gaze locked on me. "Did Griffin bring you? Is this some pathetic attempt to get attention after you embarrassed yourself at my table?" My chest tightened, but my face stayed calm. I didn't flinch. I didn't defend myself. I simply looked at him and said, "You accessed our clinical files at 6:29 this morning." Weston froze for half a beat, then he scoffed. "So, due diligence. And you forwarded them to a personal Gmail account at 6:41, I continued. Parker's hand tightened around the tablet. Weston's eyes flicked to Parker, then back to me. "That's none of your business." "It became my business when you tried to hide the logs," I said. The room went very still. Weston's face shifted, anger turning into something tighter. "You can't prove intent." I nodded once. "That's why I don't need to." Weston took a step forward, voice lowering. "Listen, sweetheart, you're out of your depth. This is a grown-up room." I stared at him for a long second, then turned slightly to Parker. "I'd like to withdraw from negotiations," I said calmly. "Effective immediately, incompatible leadership." Weston's head snapped toward Parker. "You can't let her do that." Parker didn't look at him. He looked at me. "Ms. Quinn," he said quietly, "if you walk, we burn." I held his gaze. "Then stop letting arsonists run your house." Weston's breathing went shallow. He looked like a man realizing the floor beneath him wasn't solid anymore. And in the corner of the glass wall, I saw Griffin's silhouette pass by, moving fast, like he'd heard something and couldn't ignore it. Griffin stepped into the doorway like he'd been running and pretending he hadn't. His hair was slightly out of place, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his eyes darting from his father to Parker to me, trying to understand what scene he'd just walked into. "Dad," he said, voice strained, "what is happening?" Weston didn't turn. He kept his gaze on me, but the muscles in his jaw tightened. "This is adult business, Griffin. Go sit down." Griffin didn't move. "No, you're yelling. Parker's here. Waverly's here. Why is Waverly here?" Parker finally spoke, and his tone held the kind of authority Weston usually reserved for himself. "Because your father violated a confidential access agreement and created a legal hazard for this firm." Griffin blinked, like the words were too big to land all at once. "He did what?" Weston's lips curled. "Don't you dare start acting morally superior. You live off what I built." Griffin's face flushed, but he held his ground. "Tell me what you did." Weston's eyes flashed. "I access data, due diligence. The other side is being dramatic." I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct. I let him speak, because every sentence he offered was another rope he wrapped around himself. Parker looked at me. "Ms. Quinn, your decision to withdraw is noted, but before we proceed, I need clarity. Who are you exactly in this transaction?" Weston scoffed. "She's nobody. She's a distraction." I met Parker's gaze, calm. "I'm the authorized signatory for Larkridge Medical Systems." Parker's eyes narrowed. "Authorized signatory is not ownership." I nodded, like we were discussing whether. "I'm the majority owner." The room shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It was more like air pressure changing. Griffin's mouth parted slightly. Weston's expression froze, the contempt on his face stalling as his brain tried to reject reality. "That's not possible," Weston said, and the confidence in his voice cracked around the edges. "It is," I replied. "Your team has been negotiating with my board and my council under a holding structure. I chose not to be visible because visibility creates noise. I prefer results." Weston stared at me like I'd changed shape in front of him. "You're lying." Arden opened her folder and slid a single sheet across the table to Parker. "No drama, just paper." Parker glanced down. His eyes moved quickly. Then he looked back up, and the color drained from his face in a controlled way. "This confirms beneficial ownership," Parker said quietly, "and it confirms the audit trail." Weston leaned forward, voice sharp. "Give me that." Parker didn't hand it over. That one small denial did more to Weston than any insult could have. For the first time, he was not the one controlling the objects in the room. Griffin's voice came out rough. "Waverly, you own Larkridge." I didn't look at him yet. I kept my focus on Weston because he was the problem that needed to be handled first. Weston pointed at me, finger trembling slightly. "You set me up." I tilted my head. "I gave you secure access in response to your request. You chose to misuse it. That's not a setup. That's a test you failed." He laughed once, brittle. "You think you can destroy me because I hurt your feelings at dinner?" I kept my voice even. "You didn't hurt my feelings. You revealed your character. Then you exposed your firm. Then you tried to cover it up. That's not personal. That's dangerous." Parker set the tablet down slowly, like he was trying not to trigger an explosion. "Weston, did you forward proprietary clinical data to a third party outside the firm?" Weston's eyes flicked to Griffin, then back to Parker. "It was a contractor." Parker's tone hardened. "Did you have authorization to do that?" Weston's silence was answer enough. Griffin took a step closer. "Dad, did you send it to someone else?" Weston turned on him, voice low and vicious. "Don't you take her side. She's playing you." Griffin's shoulders squared. "I'm not taking sides. I'm asking if you broke the rules." Weston's face twisted. "Rules are for people without leverage." That sentence landed like a confession. Parker exhaled, long and controlled. "Then we have a problem." Weston's eyes widened. "Parker, don't be dramatic. We can fix this. We'll smooth it over. We'll sign. She'll take the money. Everyone wins." I finally looked at Griffin. His eyes were glossy, and not from tears yet, but from shock. He looked like a man watching his childhood version of his father collapse into something uglier than he'd admitted. I spoke softly, to Griffin this time. "At dinner, your father called me temporary." Griffin swallowed. "I know." "And he thought I would accept whatever he offered because he decided who I was," I continued. "That's what he does. He assigns value to people before they speak." Griffin's voice trembled. "I'm sorry." I nodded once, acknowledging the apology without taking it as payment. Now he's doing it again, in a business room. He's assuming he can bully his way out of consequences. Weston slammed his palm lightly on the table, not hard enough to look out of control, just hard enough to remind everyone he was used to being obeyed. "Enough! Waverly, name your price. We'll increase the offer. You want a board seat? Fine. You want my apology? Fine." His eyes narrowed, and his voice dropped into something poisonous. "You want Griffin? Take him. But don't pretend you can dictate terms to me in my building." I stared at him for a long moment, and I felt the old humiliation from the dinner table try to rise again, like a reflex. But it didn't. It couldn't, because humiliation requires you to believe their judgment matters. I stood up slowly, smoothing the front of my dress the way I'd smoothed the linen napkin at that dinner. Calm is a weapon when your opponent expects tears. "I'm not dictating terms to you," I said quietly. "I'm removing your access." Weston's brow furrowed. "Removing what access?" Arden didn't speak. She simply slid a second document onto the table, this one addressed to Hayes Capital's Compliance Committee and Board Chair, already time-stamped, already rooted. Parker picked it up, scanned it, and his face tightened further. "This is a formal notice," Parker said, voice clipped. "It cites breach of confidentiality, attempted concealment of audit logs, and reputational risk. It also includes a request for an emergency vote regarding managing partner authority." Weston's eyes snapped to Parker. "You can't be serious." Parker's voice was flat. "I am. You created exposure that could sink the firm, and you did it without board authorization." Weston's breathing quickened. "You're going to let her manipulate you?" Parker's gaze didn't waver. "She didn't manipulate anything. You left fingerprints everywhere." Weston's face turned red, then pale. His confidence began to fracture in small, visible ways. He wasn't used to being cornered by facts. He looked at Griffin like Griffin was supposed to save him. Tell them I did what I had to do." Griffin's throat worked, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like it hurt. "Dad, you always say you want me to be better than you." Weston's eyes narrowed. "I want you to be strong." Griffin nodded slowly. "Then I'm going to be strong now." Weston blinked, confused. "What are you saying?" Griffin drew in a shaky breath. "I'm saying you were wrong, at dinner, in this deal, in how you treat people, and I'm saying I'm done pretending it's normal." For a second, Weston looked like he might strike him with words, but the room was no longer his stage. Even his cruelty suddenly had fewer places to land. Parker turned slightly, as if addressing an invisible audience. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting right now. Weston, until the review is complete, you will not be involved in this transaction." Weston's voice rose, just a notch, the first time I'd heard it lose polish. "You can't do that to me." Parker's tone was ice. "We can, and we will." Weston's gaze snapped back to me, desperation now leaking through his anger. "If you walk, you'll hurt employees, thousands of them. You'll hurt hospitals. You'll hurt people." I didn't blink. If your firm cared about employees, you wouldn't celebrate layoffs as efficiency. His nostrils flared. "So what, you're going to blow up the deal out of spite?" I paused, just long enough for the pause to feel like a door closing. "No," I said, "I'm going to change the deal." Parker's eyes sharpened. "What do you mean?" I slid my phone from my purse and placed it on the table, face up. The screen showed an email draft already prepared, addressed to a competitor firm I knew Parker respected and feared. "I have a standing offer from another buyer," I said calmly. "A clean buyer, one that doesn't require me to wonder who is stealing my data before assigning." Parker's jaw tightened. He didn't like being outplayed, but he liked losing even less. "What do you want?" Parker asked again, and his voice this time carried urgency. I kept my voice quiet. "I want Hayes Capital out of my company, completely." Weston let out a short, furious laugh. "You can't just..." I looked at him. "You told me I didn't belong at your table. Fine, I won't sit at it." Then I turned back to Parker. "However, I will consider an alternative." Parker's eyes locked on mine. "Alternative?" I nodded slightly. "Larkridge will not be acquired by Hayes Capital. Instead, Larkridge will acquire a controlling stake in Hayes Capital's healthcare portfolio assets, the parts your investors actually care about. We will take them over, restructure ethically, and protect the clinical integrity you were willing to compromise." Parker stared. Arden stayed still beside me, but I could feel her excitement under the calm. Weston looked like he'd been slapped. "You want to buy parts of my firm?" "I want to remove you from any decision that touches patients," I corrected. "And I want to make sure your money can't poison what I've built." Parker's lips parted. He was calculating rapidly. "That would require investor approval." "Yes," I said. "And your investors are already spooked. They just saw a breach. They just saw an attempted cover-up. They will choose stability." Weston leaned forward, voice pleading now, which was almost worse than his insults. "Parker, don't. This is my legacy." Parker's eyes didn't soften. "Your legacy just tried to hide audit logs." Weston's face twisted. He looked at Griffin again, and this time there was panic in his gaze. "Griffin, do something." Griffin's shoulders shook once, like he was holding back something primal. Then he spoke quietly. I already did. We all turned to him. Griffin swallowed hard. His eyes met mine, and there was shame there and something else. Responsibility. When I left your house after dinner, Griffin said to his father, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing you call her temporary. I kept hearing everyone laugh. Weston's face hardened. Spare me the guilt speech. Griffin continued anyway. So I went into your office. I looked at the deal files. I saw the request for early access. And I saw you texting someone I didn't recognize about sending data off-site. Weston's eyes widened. You went through my phone. Griffin's voice stayed steady, but it was shaking at the edges. I took a screenshot of the message chain, the timestamps, the contact name, and I sent it to Arden. Arden didn't react. She didn't need to. Her calm was the proof. Weston stared at his son like he didn't recognize him. You betrayed me. Griffin flinched, but he didn't back down. No, I stopped you. The room went silent, thick and absolute. For the first time, Weston Hayes didn't have words that could fix his position because the damage wasn't emotional. It was documented. Parker spoke first, voice low. Griffin, you sent evidence of a potential breach to the other side's counsel. Griffin nodded. Yes. Parker's mouth tightened. Then he said something that sounded like reluctant respect. That may have saved this firm from a lawsuit. Weston's breath hitched. You're siding with them. Parker's eyes stayed on Weston. I'm siding with survival. Weston's shoulders sagged a fraction, as if his body finally understood what his ego refused to accept. He was outnumbered, not by people, but by paper. Parker stepped toward the door. I'm calling the board. Weston, you will remain available for questioning. You will not contact any investors, press, or employees without approval. Weston's eyes went wild. You're doing this because she embarrassed me at dinner. Parker didn't even look at him. You did this because you couldn't handle a woman staying quiet. When Parker left, Weston turned to me, and the room suddenly felt smaller, like a cage. He lowered his voice. If you take this from me, you'll make an enemy. I held his gaze. You already were one. You just didn't realize I had the power to answer. His lips curled. You think this makes you better than me? I shook my head once. No, it makes me responsible. There's a difference. Weston's eyes flicked to Griffin. And you, he hissed, you'll regret this. Griffin's voice broke, but he spoke anyway. I regret not speaking faster at the dinner. That confession hung in the air. Weston looked at him, then at me, and for a moment he looked old. Not rich old, human old, like a man realizing the world had moved and he hadn't. Arden's phone buzzed. She glanced down, then looked at me. Board vote is scheduled in 30 minutes. Parker wants you in the main room. I nodded. As we walked out, Griffin fell into step beside me. His voice was low. I didn't tell you I took the screenshot because I didn't want you to think I was doing it for you. I looked at him. Why did you do it? He swallowed. Because when he called you temporary, I realized he has always treated people as objects. And I realized if I stayed quiet, I'd become him. I stopped walking for a second. The hallway around us stayed quiet, but the office felt like it was holding its breath. I spoke softly. I don't need a prince. Griffin's eyes tightened. I know. I need someone who chooses right even when it costs. I continued. He nodded once. I'm choosing it. The board meeting was fast, not because they were kind, but because panic makes decisions quicker. Parker presented the audit trail. Legal presented exposure. Investors on speakerphone demanded containment. Weston tried to speak twice and was interrupted both times. His power evaporated in real time, not with yelling, but with procedural language. At 10:14 a.m., the board voted to remove Weston from operational control pending investigation. At 10:19 a.m., Parker turned to me and said, Ms. Quinn, present your alternative structure. I did, calmly, clearly, with terms that protected patience and punished arrogance without ever calling it revenge. They accepted. Not because they liked me. because they had no safer choice. By noon, Weston Hayes walked out of his own building through a side exit. No cameras, no farewell, just a man in a suit carrying the quiet weight of consequences. Griffin resigned the same day, not because I asked, because he finally understood that love without courage is just comfort. That evening, back in my hotel room, I unfolded the Walmart receipt and smoothed it flat on the desk. It was from a late night months ago, when I'd bought a cheap frozen dinner and a bottle of store-brand water and told myself I was going to build something no one could take. I stared at that red rollback sticker and felt something inside me settle into peace. Weston Hayes taught me I didn't belong at his table, so I bought the room, changed the rules, and made sure he never sat down again.